What's up guys, welcome to this video where I'm going to be showing you the secret to making your FPV footage crispy AF in 2022. I'm gonna be walking you through every single setting that I use to make my footage look as good as possible. By far the most important thing that you can do to improve your FPV footage is to hit the like button down below. No, but seriously guys, it really helps the channel a ton. I try to put out as much free content on this channel as possible, and hitting that like button just really helps me out. So thank you guys, and let's get into the video. Odds are if you're watching this video, you understand how FPV works. You take a drone, you get some action camera, you slap it on top, and then you film with that camera. By far, in my opinion, the best camera to go with is the GoPro Hero 10. This camera just came out at the time of recording, and like I said, I expect every new GoPro to kind of replace this as my #1 recommendation. These settings also apply for all other GoPros you're using as well. The other camera that a lot of people actually use and is really solid is the GoPro Hero 6. It's actually an amazing camera, especially if you're on a little bit more of a budget, because the footage is actually really close to the Hero 10. And it's a great camera because you can shoot 4K 60 and stabilize it with REELSTEADY. But every single year, GoPro comes out with a new GoPro, and every year it seems to just be stepping up and up and up. I've used both the Osmo and Insta360 on this channel, doing reviews in the past if you guys want to go check those out, but by far the GoPro is your best bet. GoPro picture quality is really good. It's got a great bit rate, the dynamic range is solid, and it's compatible with a program called REELSTEADY, which gives your footage a huge leg up on everything else. Even GoPro's internal stabilization, Hypersmooth, is really nothing compared to REELSTEADY. Don't get me wrong, Hypersmooth is good, but REELSTEADY is just so crispy. Little side note here, GoPro actually acquired REELSTEADY, so I'm hoping in the future at some point there's gonna be REELSTEADY style stabilization automatically built into the GoPro. But for now, it's a standalone program. And basically what that means is you film the footage on your camera, you have to turn Hypersmooth off, and then once you have the video file from your GoPro, you bring it into your computer, you run it through REELSTEADY, and you end up with a perfectly stabilized clip. REELSTEADY does cost $99, but in my opinion, it is well worth it. And if you want to get $5 off, there's a link down in the description. And just to kind of explain the reasoning behind why I'm so focused on REELSTEADY compatibility is because it will literally make a massive difference in your footage. Before I was using REELSTEADY, my footage was decent, but even with the really solid Hypersmooth in the Hero 10, it's still not even close to REELSTEADY. REELSTEADY can take a clip that's like, basically looks like this, and it'll just put it through its programming and it'll just look completely smooth. So when you're flying FPV, it just gives it this like really special quality that you don't really see anywhere else. All right, so let's get into the actual GoPro settings now. I actually filmed this video a little bit earlier this year for my course FPV Academy that I have, but I figured I'd just make a YouTube version as well because there was a lot of people asking me about it. If you're interested in getting a way more in-depth education about flying FPV, everything from getting your first drone to what drones to use to how to edit the footage and everything in between, definitely check out FPV Academy. I'll throw a link down below as well. But for now, let's just get into the settings. The short answer is you want to be shooting at 4K 60 or whatever resolution you want to be using for that specific situation. Just make sure it's compatible with REELSTEADY. Later in the video, I'll add a REELSTEADY compatibility chart, but all the rest of the settings are exactly the same. So you want your ISO to be 100 to 400, sharpness low, shutter fixed at double your shutter speed. So if you're shooting at 30 frames per second, you want your shutter to be 1/60, or if you're shooting at 60 frames per second, you want your shutter speed to be 1/120. When you're shooting on the Hero 10, just make sure you're shooting on 4/3 crop, so when REELSTEADY crops in, you'll have the widest possible picture. For previous GoPros, just make sure you're shooting on the wide setting. To be honest, the majority of the time, I just use the automatic shutter speed settings and just put ND filters on to adjust accordingly. Getting your shutter speed right is what's gonna give you that really crispy looking motion blur at the bottom and top of your image. Here's an example of one without motion blur. And then here's a clip with. the best ND filters that I've found for GoPros are from Polar Pro. And like I mentioned before, if you're going to be using ReelSteady, just make sure Hypersmooth is off. Here is that compatibility chart for ReelSteady, so feel free to just pause the video or whatever and just make sure the settings that you're shooting are compatible. I'm just gonna go ahead and assume here that you guys have a basic knowledge of video, so I don't really need to explain why you want to be shooting in 4K. However, moving on to the frame rate, which is 60, that is basically telling your GoPro to shoot in slow motion. And when you're editing FPV footage, you definitely want that extra flexibility to slow things down, because a lot of times when you're shooting FPV, you're shooting high action stuff. All right, so on to the rest of the settings. And the reason you want the sharpness low is because GoPro usually adds this weird sharpness to the image that makes it kind of have that GoPro-y look. To get rid of that and make your FPV footage look more like a traditional camera, all you need to do is just turn that sharpness low. And then in general, you just don't want that much ISO, so that's why I limit it to 400, because anything past 400 and it'll give your image this like little bit of a weird grainy look. I have shot up to 800 for stuff that's like at night, for example, but you just want to limit the amount of ISO that you have. If you're shooting something that you want really, really slow motion, I'd recommend shooting at 4K 120. That's twice as slow as 60 frames per second, and that just allows you to really slow things down. Just remember to check the compatibility chart on ReelSteady if you're gonna be using that. When you do shoot 4K 120, you obviously are gonna lose a little bit of quality, and the processing time on ReelSteady on the back end definitely goes up, so I only really use it for specific situations. All the other settings all stay the same. I know that sounds like a lot of info to digest, but I promise you, once you get out there and shoot, come back, look at the footage, and just kind of adjust exactly what will work for you in the specific situations that you're shooting, it's gonna make a lot more sense. But just to make things simple, here are the exact settings that I would use if I was going out on a shoot right now. This is with the Hero 10. I'd be using 4K 60 4/3 crop, ISO 100 to 400, sharpness low, and then I'd throw on an ND filter. Lastly, I'd just make sure that stabilization is off. Then I'd hit record and send it. The last thing I want to touch on is SD cards, because these newer GoPros, they actually record way faster than a lot of slow SD cards can handle. So I always use these Delkin V90s. It's way faster and I always know I'm gonna be good. Link down in the description as well. Completely not required, but I always enjoy just having them just in case I am shooting like 4K 120, for example. Sometimes it'll just overrun your old memory card and you don't want that to happen. Anyways, guys, that is it for this video. I hope that clears things up as far as settings go. Leave a comment down below if you have suggestions for videos you want me to do in the future. Don't forget to hit the like button. I really, really appreciate it and it helps the channel a ton. But that's it for this video. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.